Grant, welcome to the pod.
Thanks so much, man. Excited to chat.
For everyone who's listening and doesn't know about you and your awesomeness, can you share a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So the 30-second summary is that I run GrantBot Process Consulting, no code automation agency. A lot of people think they need AI, fine-tuned models. It's really usually just like an open AI step inside of a make automation. So we're pretty good at that. And our goal is to help founders and their teams save time so they can work on high leverage, innovative things.
I was on a roundtable here in San Diego. We did an event, and one of the guys there founded this AI company that supports. I think he's niching down for the legal system. Somehow, like he created something that consolidates a ton of information and like legal documents and helps lawyers in particular reduce time to execute these docs. Long story short, I was brainstorming like, oh man, do I need AI for this? I need that. Oh, it sounds like you need a spreadsheet in Zapier. And I'm like, what? So it's incredible. So let's dive into that. This is an obvious, stupid question, but why AI? And then why you don't need AI? And I think it's the flip side of that. Of we want to leverage technology, we want to be ahead of the curve. Where do you see clients get it wrong? And why are you making it simple? Like maybe we just use Make, Zapier, spreadsheets.
Yeah. And first off, no stupid questions. So happy to answer. I think from my perspective, there's this nice little flow chart that I show a lot of people when I give presentations, and sometimes it's even to leads. But it's the idea that like an automation needs to have a structured process. It takes place in a digital environment. The quality cannot be, well, the quality will stay high without putting more technology into the process. And then further down the decision tree, it's does there need to be creative work, or is there judgment? Is there decision making on the inputs? And traditionally, you need to have no creative work and you need to have no judgment. And that's when something can be automated. But now you can jump a few branches higher into the chain when you use AI. And I think that the AI step in an automation accomplishes a lot of that low level decision making that pulls us out of our flow states. And a lot of the kind of push that I make with people around automation is that, yes, there's the quantitative aspect of we're saving you minutes, which rolls up to hours, which rolls up to cost per hour, and therefore you save X number of dollars per month. But I also think the qualitative side is super important, that if we can just remove a few of those micro decisions of how do I categorize this thing, or is this a one or a zero binary decision making, that allows you to stay in your flow state or in your concentration mode longer, which ultimately allows you to get more stuff done. So there's a lot of the qualitative side of this too that AI inside of automation allows you to push forward on.
I like that you distinguish between inputs, outputs, but then judgment and creative. Obviously, on the creative front, I see some incredible tools that we can create, like lifelike imagery and lifelike videography. And I think that's incredibly fascinating to see how quickly every week there's something new. On the judgment front, I like that you said that because I do, in my workflows, I do see where, hey, can you turn this into a table? Can you reorganize this format? Can you derive some key data points from this? Or I have a sales call review. Like here are the ways that I want to structure my executive review for the sales call, or et cetera, et cetera. So I like that you're mentioning it's low level judgment. Where can this go wrong? I know the creative front is not perfect, especially for copywriting. It's still revolutionize your stuff, but where can this go wrong, or where have you seen this go wrong in either logic for clients or in real life from other people that you come in, you look at their workflows like, oh, this is jumbled together. We're doing too much with AI.
Yeah, I think on the copywriting creative side, I'll just double down and say, do not let it write your emails for you. Always put it in drafts and then make your own decisions. And always read through everything so that you know that you're sending something that actually sounds like you. But I think that when it comes to logic, when people don't give good definitions of what category A or category B and category C actually are, that's where you can run into some issues with logics. For instance, if you have a customer support ticket that comes in and it might get routed to 4 different teams, instead of just saying it's the product team versus the UX versus UI versus to the founder, it's an urgent thing. Instead of just like saying, here are my categories, put pretty strong definitions around those things of a founder should get notified if these 3 bullets are true. And the UX team should get notified if these 4 things are mentioned, right? Or one of these 4 things. The stronger your definitions are, the better your logic will be. So I think that's a pretty important thing to keep in mind when you're putting some of these judgment action steps into your automations. Because if your definitions are bad, your logic will definitely be bad.
one of the things that I'm hearing here too, and I see this also in my workflows, is you have to have a very good standard strategy to deploy before you can automate. And I think at least what I find is people try to go to automation first without actually thinking, which it sounds silly saying it, but even I've have clients that are doing they told me, hey, I know I'm doing tactical. This isn't a separate field. I don't do the automation piece. I do more sales and go to market. Like we're doing tactical things. I know I'm buying tactical things, but I need the thinking. I need the strategy behind the tactics. And I know we need to work with you, but let me just fill out these tactical things first. Do you find the same way? Like people try to go straight into let's automate everything without actually having the strategy behind it. And how do we get to strategy quicker?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I've honestly started asking people, even in my first call, do you think that your process is going to change in the next 6 months? And if the answer is confidently no, then I say, great, let's take a look at some automation options for you. But when people will switch their whole invoicing process in month 2 of an automation engagement, the whole thing gets burned to the
Mhm.
ground, right? We got to start from scratch. And I've learned the hard way that is you're setting yourself up for failure if you're thinking that there might be a change in process because you want to lay the tracks, you want to lay the railroad tracks one time for an automation and have it run 10,000 times on that
Mhm.
track. But if you're going to move the track or the track is going to bifurcate at some point, you're going to have to lay a new track after that. So that's a very important question to ask yourself, or at least to have your automation partner ask. Because if you go too soon and you build infrastructure before, like really long infrastructure before your processes are set, you're going to end up wasting time. And it's been really difficult for someone like me who knows what can be built in our processes. We're a young company, things are changing all the time. I'm like, I would love to automate this, but we're still finding our way.
Mhm.
So sometimes it can be frustrating, even when I know what's possible. I'm like, let me give it a month. Let me make sure this is not going to change, and then we can build stuff. And I'm finally getting to that point in a few exciting parts of the business.
Well, let's talk about that in just a second. But the precursor is there's a help me understand the gap between the no code because essentially you're doing digital transformation, and when you do this, the
Mhm.
stats I'm doing. Some of my clients are in software. The stats are digital transformation isn't always 100% clean, especially for larger orgs. Like fail rates 17% are black swan events, and usually fail rates are like 30 to 40%. So it doesn't happen properly across the course. But help me understand and maybe contextualize. I know no code, I know custom software, but are the lines blurring more and more now that we have the co-pilots higher way more intelligent no code tools to go to execute and actually build code for you? Like where is that intersection now? And where do you see the future of the custom software side with the no code solution side?
Yeah, I think low code is going to start to blend into low code and no code are going to start to blend into their own the same
Mm.
thing, right? It's going to be pretty easy for folks to say, "Oh, instead of having 6 steps in this Zap, I can have 2 or 3, and the middle one is going to be a code block." And that code block is going to be entirely written by OpenAI, Perplexity, whatever it is. I think that's going to become a lot more common over the next 6 to 12
Mm.
months. And so the convergence of low code and no code will definitely get there. And even if you don't know how to code at all, you can still ask the model to write it, explain it line by line. And then if you run it and it doesn't do that, then you can still say lines 36 to 40 say they do this, but the thing didn't do
Mm.
that. So let's take a look at 36 to 40. I think that's going to be very common and par for the course for a lot of no coding. So I definitely think there's a convergence happening. Am I putting all my time into learning code right now? No, I think the no code tools are going to be plenty
Mhm.
sufficient. And really, your average Joe plus an LLM, I think you're going to get a lot done.
Yeah, and I'm finding that as well. I know the custom software is down the other end because it's specific for use cases and usually for larger orgs. And I think that we're going to date ourselves with this, but like the rise of agents, I think is going to happen. What you just mentioned on the code solution, like the agent itself will figure that out to plug the two ends together with the advanced logic, with some of the cool
Hmm.
things we've been seeing. Let's dive into one of the things that you mentioned, especially because like I mentioned earlier, we want to integrate AI where we can. We want to be more effective. We want to boost profitability by lowering working hours or tasks and maybe do more higher strategic level thinking. But you also mentioned you need to have the process. We need to have the actual strategy dialed in first. But there's also I don't have everything dialed in. So where do we start? What are the lowest hanging fruit? Do we have a roadmap or like a playbook of here are the lowest hanging fruits? For your bigger pieces, you can automate certain pieces, but not all of it. Where should we be looking at when we're trying to refine and redefine how we operate using the new tech?
Yeah, I think we work predominantly with B2B services, marketing agencies, law firms, accountants, et cetera. And there are four main buckets of opportunity. It's the CRM to win projects, client onboarding to launch the projects, project management to fulfill the projects, and then invoicing to collect the project revenue. So inside of each of those four buckets, there's a lot that we can do between picking a tool like HubSpot or ClickUp, and then just applying it to its fullest capability. That's even before you get a automation system built in, right? So those two tools, if you get the foundational data put where it needs to be, so your company records are all filled out, your contact records are all filled out, even if you're not looking at building the HubSpot workflow flows or the ClickUp internal automations, just making sure that your data is all in the right place and consistent, I think is a really good first step to then use all the features later, right? And we're not talking about using any Zapier or Make. We're not talking about using any AI in any of this stuff yet. This is purely making sure that everything is filled out the way it's intended. And then you can start using the bells and whistles. And if you're on a tool like ClickUp, then you've got whiteboarding, which is a Miro competitor. You've got a video recording tool, which is a Loom competitor. So you could actually get even more bang for your buck if you're just aware of all the features. And the same thing goes for HubSpot, right? If what's all there, you can get the lowest hanging fruit, which is, I really just think data integrity that's the lowest hanging fruit that a lot of people are ignoring. Because once you have all your data in the
You
right
can do
spots,
everything.
then it's pretty easy to apply automation when the time
Yeah,
comes.
that was Salesforce's pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of tools that are doing like the manual entry for you. Not a sponsor, but like Fathom, I know could do that for your CRM, just like with typeless integration within from calls. So I think that's fascinating, and that's a really
Totally.
cool way. And to your point on that too, making sure that we're fully flexing. I was reviewing a soft before this call. I'm not sure if you have. I'll talk to you about it after. It's like $1,000 a month. I'm like, okay, let's look what's under the hood. It replaces other subscriptions that I already have, not fully, but other subscriptions to outreach, email, LinkedIn, email integration, inbound integration, warm signal, like all these is a sales mechanism tool, but all these different things. And it
Hmm.
was all packaged in a really competitive price. It sounds expensive, but compared to all the other tools and how much money I just dropped in one just for the weekend.
Yep.
So I think to your point, this is not knowing how to leverage the technology and obviously like the time that we need to learn this, but actually knowing when you buy a stack, you need to make sure that you have the foundation set up because you need to integrate this tool integrates with specific CRMs. Are you using that correctly? Are you filling that in correctly? Because when you do that, it like I mean, not a proponent of it, but the Salesforce pitch of the agent force thing, I think their marketing is phenomenal. Sometimes the app can be very difficult to use, but the way that they're approaching it is fantastic because now, since all your data lives there, it allows you to enable to use the new tech in very unique ways that you couldn't before. But the data has to be there. You have to be using the right tool sets first. To your point on that.
Well, and just on a very base case, leveling up from data to an advanced feature. If you look at HubSpot, and if you don't have your tracking codes put in, you're not using maybe the email, some of the email integrations. If those things are not set up, you can't turn on lead scores. And lead scores are a super easy thing that when the data is where it needs to be, you just get a number of, okay, they're at 65 out of 100. They're an MQL, right? Super valuable if all the data is where it needs to be. And so I think that when people are also looking at complicating their tech stack, really think about, am I getting the most out of the current tools I'm using, right? And then if you're not, fill out all the data requirements, fill out all the data fields. And pro tip, you can also make it so that you can't move a deal to a certain stage or you can't do something
Yeah.
unless fields are
Oh,
filled
yeah.
out. I'm turning that on for myself, like super valuable. But then it's all about leveling up. Set it all up correctly, get someone's help if you want, but set it up correctly, get the next layer of feature. And then the ROI that we're coming to the table with is if you can get HubSpot to talk to ClickUp, to talk to DocuSign, to talk to QuickBooks, that's another layer of ROI before you purchase the next tier of HubSpot or the next tier of Salesforce. So another thing to think about there.
Yeah. And I'm finding it too that the ways that I've integrated some of my automations, like it does replace at least a part-time role for specific functions of the company, which isn't to say the
Hmm.
antithesis. It's going to take away jobs. I think right now it really forces you to level up in other areas. And when you hire people, they got to be at a higher caliber versus, hey, I need you to push these buttons and move these deals or collect this. Moving on the flip side, you mentioned earlier that you were looking at improving your processes, improving the way that you execute your work and onboard clients and work with clients. I know one of our pre-calls, we were talking about like pricing and the way that the markets are shifting. And I'll set this up with the frame of I'm finding, and this has been true for quite a while, but now with the rise of new technology and the rise of getting quicker, like solutions faster with AI, it is exacerbating the problem for anyone who's charging by the hour. If your agency is hourly billing, like you will be commoditized if you haven't been already and run to the ground for pricing if you haven't been already. But the AI is accelerating that. Even over last week, I saw a tool. I'm not sure the validity of this tool because it's a creative like briefing tool. It's what,
Mhm.
$300, something $150 a month. So good pricing, but it develops a creative brief, like strategy for like creatives or planners in like larger agencies instantaneously. It does all the market research for you and it delivers this brief so that you can execute with your marketing team. That usually takes maybe 2 to 3 weeks. If you're doing it with a sprint, this can do it like an hour. So the time to value and what the tools are allowing us to do is increase or decrease the time to getting to value quicker so that we can execute. Anyway, that's a lot to dive into, but what are you seeing when it comes to value, pricing, user economics? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a tricky business right now because I think a lot of people want to apply the tech and decrease that time to value, but we also need to think about our pricing and the way that teams operate and if we track time and what's productive to the business in terms of like revenue per hour or revenue per employee. For me, I'm very glad that we were never on an hourly system. I think that you're spot on that things are going to get commoditized. If you're making the pitch that my retainer is going to be 10 hours of someone's time here, whatever it ends up looking like. But we do have to think about how are we positioning ourselves against the value you're driving for the company. One thing I struggle with, and again, something that we talked about earlier, is we are inherently cost reductive, right, in the automation world. So as I apply a much better project management system, I'm going to save hours for the project manager and everyone below to make sure that things are getting done on time and in full. That is reducing costs. It's not necessarily driving more revenue. Now, if I'm reducing the time for each of those roles, that allows the fulfillment team to maybe handle 1 or 2 or 3 more clients per month, then there's an argument to be made about revenue. Great. But it's that positioning that becomes a really difficult
Yes.
challenge to overcome. And so I think that a lot of businesses right now need to think about how am I going to position myself, whether it be to generate more leads? Great. Everyone loves more leads. But on the automation side, if you are doing cost reductive activities, it's the expansion of the business that needs to be prioritized. And that's a tough one to make the jump for. A lot of people just have a gut feeling that their operations are not ideal. And I don't really know how to write. Does it feel like your operations suck right now? Let us help you. That's a tough one to argue
Yeah.
for.
So I think I'm going to share a framework because this is fresh off of my mind that could help and help this conversation. But I think the bigger piece framework that for you're just mentioning are specific user pain points that they're facing and applying a metric to that. So the
Hmm.
framework that every business essentially has three metrics that they care about. CAC, customer acquisition cost, which is acquisition. Like you're not helping them acquire, but you could reduce customer acquisition costs. Second one's profit, and they either measure it by revenue per employee. What is it? The hours, reserve hours that they budget out per project. A lot of items fall under the profitability. And the last one is LTV. And I think to your point, you are hitting a lot of profitability and LTV points, but those are the major categories that you got to look at the niches that you're addressing, and then specifically what are. And I'm stealing this from a client. And you know who you are when I say this. The metric that matters. I love that they said this because each client themselves has a metric that matters to them. Even though you might say profitability, yeah, that doesn't matter, but they might care about maybe revenue per employee or like you mentioned, revenue per hour. That's fantastic. Revenue per minute. What if the client was like, oh crap, I never thought of revenue per minute? And the way that you can reframe that approach. The third part of that is looking at the key frustrations that's causing that key metric to fail. And then everything else
Yeah.
is the positioning part. But that's one way that I found to identify specifically, but you really need to dive into the metrics that matter to your specific clientele. And maybe because you're not vertical focused, you can still look at multiple verticals and look at it horizontally.
Yeah. That's a really good way to think about it because for me, just like my live reaction to that is that if I'm focused on the metric that matters, maybe it is time to fulfill or time on revenue per employee in a given month. If you can improve project management and let everyone know what they're working on and also automate a few steps between information coming into a form to a project manager being aware of it or something like that, something that just gets the ball forward a little bit faster, then you can expand. Maybe we can take on an extra 25% of a customer, or we can take on another full customer, right? Depending on start days and things like that. Then you get more revenue for each brand strategist or for each
Mhm.
copywriter. And then that's how you roll it up. Even though I'm not specifically generating the revenue, the space for that, the revenue to come in is very valuable. And I just had this conversation with someone last week where he said, if we get the ability to handle one more client next month from this ClickUp stuff, that's a huge win. I go, fantastic. I think we can definitely help just get you out of Google Sheets
Oh
and
my
into
gosh.
something that you can see a chart. That's one of my favorite things to hear on a discovery call is, oh yeah, we run everything in Google Sheets. I go, well, let's chat.
Spreadsheets do run businesses, but there's a point where that system's got to break. No, and I love that. I was
Yeah.
talking to a friend of mine. She's in operations. She was telling me like all the things, the same situations. Like, how do I? People they think of operations as a subset or like an afterthought. I got to go get that
Totally.
whatever exam from the doctor that I don't want to do, but delaying, or go to the dentist. In
Hmm.
reality, one of the ways that I flipped it, because her main thing is to help the founder or the leader get out of the day to day. Like, why don't you just anchor? Because one of the things that I find, especially with highly technical teams, some of my clients love you guys, is that they focus on the thing that they do, but they really don't reframe that thing that they do in a different light. That just highlights, yeah, we actually do it this way, so you can get this outcome in this time frame. And they don't make that the promise versus we're going to make this thing better. For example, for her, it was like, why don't you just run a boot camp where you just like guarantee in 6 weeks or less, we'll get you out of the day to day as a founder. I'd buy that all day. If I was a founder, she sold me like a thing. And this is the framework that I have of like a viral offer. This is not a viral offer. This is a product based offer that stems to your project or your subscription based offers. And the product based offer is not productizing, it's not templates, it's not all that crap. It's essentially giving an open and closed loop. The open loop is I hate the day to day. And if you close it just by buying this thing, even if it's a short term 6 week, 8 week, whatever program you want, that's what I'm finding, by the way. If they buy this thing, the very act of the purchase closes the loop in their mind. Just like I didn't buy it yet, but I downloaded this new app thanks to our friends at Hampton. Like they sent me like, oh, this health app. I'm like, okay, cool. I downloaded it. And I felt like I closed the loop. Like I got healthier, just downloaded the silly app, even though I haven't purchased it yet. But
Mhm.
because in my mind, it closes a loop. Okay, cool. Now I know how to do this. Or even for to-dos. I think this is the thing why we are obsessed with to-do lists, because we have all these things in our mind. We purchase a new to-do list, or we use paper and a new pad, and then we write everything down, and then it's all done. Nothing's done on the list. It's just out of my mind, and it
Yeah.
closed the loop. And I think that's how I would look at products. If you're selling a service, is creating a product that closes a loop. And it has to be a dopamine hit, and it has to be just the very act of working with you closes that loop. And then now their mind can open up to the bigger problem, the other issue. That's just what I'm seeing currently in and how to stack the offers differently. And then the back end, and this is like the craze with subscription or access level pricing. You could sell that, but that's more on the project side based.
So let's try this and help me kick this around. So for instance, like a ClickUp thing,
Mhm.
right? Maybe closing the loop in that way would be know what's getting done just by having the dashboards, putting all the data in the right spot, setting up the instance correctly. You can go to a single dashboard and say, I know what everyone on my team is working on, and I know where the status of the projects are.
So to your point on
So
valuing to anchoring to the value, are your ideal clients already in ClickUp or they're trying to get into ClickUp?
usually they're on Notion and fed up, so they're trying to look at something else.
Yeah, Notion is amazing tool, but not for teams.
Not for
It's
project
sync. Oh
managers.
my gosh. Everyone in Notion, anyone listening to this in Notion, respect and love, but definitely. Okay.
Please talk
Please
to me
talk to
if you're that
talk to
person.
Grant. Okay. So they're on another tool set. What are they doing or how much are they wasting in terms of time, hours, or there's an emotional toll, and then there's also the business case toll. Like how much is being wasted right now?
You can get so granular to say it takes 8 clicks to find the thing that you're looking for, right? Because Notion is effortless or endlessly
Yeah.
nested.
Real
So I
life.
think that, yeah, totally.
But 8 clicks and I'm looking for it and I don't feel secure. Like, how much time does that waste in a week?
Man, this is one of the things I struggle with. If that's happening, just to find any document, maybe that happens 10 to 15 times a day. If I'm looking through my wiki, that might feel right to me. For an extra, I think the problem is that for an extra minute to 90 seconds of clicking through things to find the thing you're looking for, it's more the breaking of the flow and the frustration of where the heck is my thing. And those things I can't roll up into minutes, right?
I mean, you could, but I'm anchoring it. This is just real time, high level, anchoring it towards
Yeah.
a minute or whatever. But then the flip side is going to be on average, do you have a transformation metric for clients? Like how faster can they find this or how more confident do they feel? Or what is one of the, maybe choose a benefit that you deliver and then what's a metric that you've used to measure that benefit?
Frankly, I haven't thought about it like that. It'd probably be speed. Yeah. Speed to access the thing. I don't know. This is why I like talking to you. You've got great questions. The last when we were a pre-call, I was like, dang, I got a lot to think about.
You solve the same problem over and over again for clients. You get kind of good. So this is high level. Obviously, this is at face value, but I think for everyone listening here, it's really helpful to look at what are the pain points that the clients are facing and how do we measure that? Because there's usually two pain points that we can measure. One is the quality of life, like a personal, like what happens if I don't solve this issue for me personally, like me as a client. And then second, what's the business case? Because every time that you go to market, if it's a product-based offer or a subscription service-based offer, it has to have a business case. It has to have a solution that helps them, which is obvious. But I think framing it in that way helps us think about it this way. But I thought, okay, look at 10 documents just to do my job per day, and I waste maybe 2 minutes doing that. And that's realistic because sometimes we think we do it in 15 seconds. Things usually for me take longer. Like for projects, oh my gosh, it's taking me longer to do this thing to think. So it's just the 2 minutes on average. And if your team has 8 people, you might be wasting 162 hours, let's say conservatively, 160 minutes, 2 to 3 hours, just to say 2 hours to be conservative. Wastes. If you have 8 people, your team is wasting at least 2 hours a day. That's 10 hours a week. And if that 10 hours a week, what can we do with that? Again, I don't know the answer to that, but what is the benefit? Could we onboard 5 new clients with those 10 hours? Could we be prospecting and selling for those 10 hours? Could we take, this is a realistic thing, 2 more hours of discovery calls for the team? And then from there, if you do 10 discovery calls and you close, I don't know, 2, conservative. I don't like the word using conservative here, but conservative, that's 2 new deals. You could frame it to that, or you can frame it towards the dollar amount, or you can frame it towards the time. And you wouldn't frame it around ClickUp because that's selling essentially the hands. Like I can do this thing with this, like I can do these cool things with this pad and piece of paper. No one really cares about that, unfortunately. They care more about their problems and what they want to solve. So it'd be more around I don't know, how quickly can you do this? Like how long does it take you to implement from Notion to ClickUp?
About 2 months all in.
Okay.
From design to implementation.
Potentially say, get back 10 hours a week, or you can do this in a year format. Like how much is 10 hours a week in a year multiplied? Let me do some live math for you. You move faster than I do. Okay. Then 2 weeks off, let's just say 500 hours.
Yeah.
What can we do with 500 hours? I think it would be something interesting to see. What can 500 hours mean to me? Because sometimes we hear these numbers and we don't know how long. If I told you it's going to be 367 feet, you don't even know what to think about that unless I said, it's the size of this building or that building. We have to tangify that. But if you can give me 500 hours back a year, like anchor it towards what does that mean for me based on what I want? And you could condition it around the offer saying, in 8 weeks, we will find a way to get you 500 hours back. Again, that's the value statement. We can change that value statement to something else or either time to money or employees, or maybe that's we can give you 2 employees back of payroll in 8 weeks. And if guaranteed, and if we don't, we'll work with you till you do. Because you've packed product. And who is offering that in the market right now?
Yeah.
No one. And the reason,
what's another 500 discovery calls or whatever it ends up being?
And whatever they care about, if they care about like payroll, because that's a huge issue with agencies. Okay, I'll give you back, I don't know how much 500 hours is, but I'll give you back 8 weeks or 2 months or 3 years, something of payroll. Like You can anchor towards
Mhm.
that, or I can give you these employees or whatever, tangify that. And the reason why I offer the guarantee, you don't have to do these guarantees like money back or something like that silly. But the whole idea is, and this is something that I stand by, if we believe in the work that we do, and I'm talking to the audience here, if we believe in the work that we do, and it actually gets results for clients, and you're not selling the results that you actually get, you're not promising a future that's guaranteed. You're promising that you're going to do the work. If I go to surgery, like I had a couple people in my life that went to heart surgery, open heart surgery. And if the doctor was like, yeah, you might die, but I hope this works. I'm not going to go to a doctor. But if they explain, and I actually had a client tell me that he needed to go under for something. He's like, yeah, the doctor told me there is a slight risk, 1 in 10,000, but I've done these thousands of times. You're going to be fine. We're going to do this and you're going to come back. Like, sell the confidence, sell the thing that you do and stand by that work. Because if you can't stand by your work, then we're just like the old adage of what we don't want to be in terms of selling a snake oil. But if you are doing good work and you are actually executing with the marketplace and you can stand by your work, you can just say, hey, I promise to do this work, because no one else is standing by their work that way, which is why it like gives a higher believability, and your risk rate will probably be low because you're going to go through the execution. You're going to deliver that. Clients are going to love it because they're already like solved the dopamine issue in the beginning. And then from there, the experience obviously should be good and probably is good. I think it's a win. You're just standing out by making a strong offer. You're not promising the world. Like I see online, I'll get 100 leads a day in your CRM. Like, no. It's more about promising the quality of the work towards the outcome that they care about.
Totally.
That's a pretty cool offer, though.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I hope it's useful for the people who are listening to see how you just rolled that up, because from a 2-minute time saving or from a additional 10 emails that go out a day for a different type of business, maybe you can see how these things can roll up to something really meaningful, even if it starts with such a granular thing, right? Like a 2-minute savings or a minute and a half, whatever it ends up being, that rolls up to something really meaningful when you have a team. And I've never really made that connection to the 8-person team or the 12-person team, the 15-person team. Like, holy, that's pretty serious value when you roll that all up into a year. So I hope that that's useful for someone else, like it was for me. I think that framing of start small with what the most tangible thing you can latch onto, and then apply it to a team, not an individual. Think about a year, not a day. That's a pretty impactful way to package a service or something up and close that loop, as you said.
Yeah, and that's why the work that you're doing also does profit. It's not just cost savings; it's significant profit. If the
Mhm.
average, this is again, if they are employees, et cetera, if they're not contractors, we work with 2,000 hours a year. I think on average, 2080. That's with only
Mhm.
2 weeks off. So if we do that,
Yeah,
then you're saving a fourth of that. So that's another framing of put this money back in your pocket. Like, and then that
totally.
as a business owners, I can reinvest that into growth. Just some ideas around that on pricing. But that's what I would mention around
Yeah,
the product based front, is that you create some sort of tangible, closed, open loop. And then from there, like I'm curious on your end, and we can just talk in general terms here if you want, but when they close that loop, what other problems arise in their mind by working with you? Because usually, like when I figure out, like, oh, I'm training for like a half Ironman, right? Once I got the plan
mhm.
done, then I need to solve other problems. Like, what else do I have to do this thing? What else arises in your client's mind?
I think the lack of maturity of the market is, do I really know that this person is going to do the work, as you
Mhm.
said, which is why I've really tried to focus on the social credibility on the site and making sure the testimonials focus on typical agency like problems. Are they going to communicate? Yes. One of the testimonials says very tight feedback loops. Great. Like, do they care about me long term? A lot of people hire an agency and are worried that you work with the founder in the sales process and then you're gone. Also, like, making sure that relationship and that communication is really a focus throughout the entire engagement. I think the credibility side, with how quickly AI and automation are coming online, there's so many new entrants to the market. So it's hard to stand out and make sure that you communicate trust on that first
Yeah, that
impression.
makes a lot of sense. The other thing too that I find, especially with teams that do exceptional work, is it's hard to communicate that. Like like, how do you communicate exceptional work? Because they have to come through the journey with you to see that, and every time that they do, it's like a MVP experience. And I have clients that do that same thing. I think the only way to hook them in is through that, like you mentioned, the trust, credibility, because essentially your marketing is selling safety. It has to sell like it's going to be safe. And then the offering or the product, like the front end offering, has to sell the transformation so that they can feel like this is different. This is not just a set of hands. And the more unique you make it to your market, the more, oh, this is made just for me. But again, that depends on your positioning if you want to niche down even further. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I usually, I was talking to Will, if you're listening to this, I was talking to Will Stevens. And he also asked me this on his podcast. Is niching down can be a very hard situation. Like people say to choose one niche. You can do horizontal niching. You can do solution-based niching. If you start expanding your target audience, then you have to go to multiple industries. What are your thoughts on niching down?
In my experience, when I thought I was niching down, I was not doing it enough, especially with this productized service that we have launched recently. I thought that by saying it's only going to be on ClickUp, Notion, Asana, and what was it, Coda. I'm only going to build this thing on 4 different project management tools. Someone was like, do you like using Asana and Coda? And I'm like, no, I really just ClickUp and I'll tolerate Notion because so many people are on it. And he's like, okay, stay there. And that's the niche. And if they don't use Slack, don't even have the conversation, just avoid it because we have to use Slack. And so for this service. And so I think that when in the past I've been thinking about, oh, am I niching down enough? In that specific instance with the productized service, not even close, right? I was allowing someone to do this customization or that customization, but I needed a reframe of the product is this, and we'll change the name on the button here. And then if they need anything else, we can provide that because it is automation. It is still custom, but we're following a framework. And right now, with your point about solution-based, like I mentioned, marketing agencies, law firms, and accountants, all B2B services, all with the same 4 buckets of problems. Now, eventually I would like to get to the point where I can say, hey, we built the framework to use PandaDoc for your signing platform. This is the template of the SOW. Are you willing to move it in to make it look like this? And I think that will allow us to both provide a higher quality service, but also bring that confidence to the engagement instead of being more custom and flowing with the wind. But right now, I struggle with this too. I think that I've got a pretty good niche within this solution-based framework of the 4 buckets of work for B2B services, but I easily could go into specifically short form video agencies because there's so many now.
Oh, yeah.
You could do that, but you have to weigh that pros and cons. If you are the guy for that, the agency for short form video content, are they going to pay you a
premium
2 or 3x premium for being that person? Or would you rather invert the ratio, service more people and drop your price? And that also gets to the point that we started this conversation about with AI and all the ability to produce things faster. Is the premium even still going to be worth it if someone can be a generalist, but satisfy things in a third of the time? I don't know. And do you get more value for doing it in a third of the time? Can you now charge more and drop the time because you're faster and you know what playbook you're deploying? We've done it 24 times. Now we can do it in 2 weeks instead of 6. Another question, right? I think there's a lot of those things that are all completely up in the air right now. We don't really know, in my opinion, what is going to be that magic formula of I'm going to be your owner retainer for $8K a month because I know that we're going to do this in month 1, this in month 2, this in month 3, pause month 4, assess, and then we'll do something from this bucket of goods for 5, 6, and 7. And if you've got it down to that level of detail and you're applying the same playbooks based on the team's priorities, awesome. But if you get to the point where you're so good and you're using AI to the fullest and your team is 6 people instead of 60 like it used to be to execute the same amount of work, does that mean that you charge less? Do you charge more because your time to value is higher and you're applying the same skill? I don't know, man. It's an interesting time with how much we can compress deliverable times.
I'm glad that you were open and vulnerable to share that because those are answerable, but they're fluctuating in terms of the variable of the answers because we haven't seen the full spectrum. We haven't seen the winner. Who's the winner? OpenAI, Perplexity. We got Llama. You got dozens of other LLMs, including Claude or Anthropic. But there's that plus a delivery at work, plus compliance, plus the industries, the only way, so there's a few things that you said that I thought were pretty fascinating. I think that your differentiator is the 4 buckets, because those 4 buckets make it feel like I have security in terms of this is how you know what you know how to solve. Another way to differentiate is through the pricing model. Like you mentioned, it doesn't have to be always cheaper. It can just be like you're doing it right the first time, or you're doing it right over time. Because like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, like I know when I set up this app, it's going to break because something's always going to update. Like I had just a simple, silly Google Calendar Zap, and it broke because Google Calendar Zapier updated and it went to legacy. I'm like, are you kidding me? I
Brutal.
know. So there's that. So there's the maintenance piece of it too. The one thing that I do, this could like another framework to share, is we look at the segments that obviously align with who you are and your team. So it has to align with your culture, but the customer segments where the work that you do is the most value to them. So that's the first. So the first is the culture and the business model. The second is the value is there. Who are you most important to? Because sometimes some people don't value some services or more than others, so there's that. But then the third is like,
Totally.
where's the market going? And I think that's the question we don't know the answer to completely. But we can either look at macroeconomics, we can look at microeconomics within an industry, and we can look at regulations and compliance, because some industries won't be on the AI train until there's further legislation, et cetera. So I think it's looking at those key things, like deriving and placing your bets strategically. And then how do you differentiate in that future that's 3 or 5 years out, even though we don't know that future because everything is speculative, and then placing your bets off of that.
It's a really interesting question. And one I think about a lot is I saw a website where they were advertising on their support page that it was human only
Oh
support.
yeah, and you'll get U.S.
That's
only
wild.
too. You're gonna get human
Yeah,
only U.S. It's the new made in the USA.
totally. And some people are okay or want to deal with a robot to get their thing in 10 seconds, right? Do I get an answer in 10 seconds? If not, maybe I'll default to someone somewhere else in the world. Or I know I'm going to get my answer correctly if I work a little bit slower and or have a little bit slower lead time, but I know I'm going to get the answer to my problem solution that matters to me. I'm good in 5 minutes, right? And that is a toss up in the same way that I think about for our service. Do you want to call a phone number that's always on, that goes straight to a voice agent that can run you through our 15-minute audit, and you'll get an email
If
with
you
all of the
have that, I'd
results of
like to have that. By the way,
it's in the works. But I think that's something where it's, do you want to work with me, Grant, and have a fun, hopefully fun conversation talking about your business and getting into some of the weeds? And maybe it takes 1 or 2 or 3 calls to get the full slate. Or do you want a robot to run you through a battery of questions and then email you 10 high leverage automations at the end of the call? I don't know. Do you want the human experience or do you want the robot experience? And we just don't know what the answer is going to be. So I think that's one of those things where you can hedge your bets, you can play both sides, but that's a very interesting, I don't know if it falls in the world of ethics or just personal preference, and everyone's going to be different, but that's a very interesting question that we're going to see take shape soon.
yeah, I think it falls under preference, because what you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier and what I said in the beginning is the culture, right? Is your team pro bullish robots, and your ideal clients like in love with the future of like robotics and like tech first, but then also you can enhance that experience with a human touch with
Hmm.
a silly example like the handwritten car, the custom onboarding call. So it's definitely interesting. What are you? I think to close this off, as we because we don't know the future and we're heading into the new advent of technology, maybe cyborgs in the future, who knows? What are you doing to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to all this information and potential future? And I know the answer, like without having analysis paralysis, but what information are you taking in? What are the trends you're looking at? What are the sources that are core to you so that you can derive the answers?
Yeah. There are a handful of things. One is always trying to meet interesting founders building things. Like a lot of conversations I have is around who's trying to build this Zapier killer. I think that's a
Please.
very interesting conversation. There's like the Lindy AIs, there's Plum, there's some really interesting kind of drag and drop builders that are trying to be agentic and make that transition, building the connectors and everything. So I think that's one thing of just having the conversations with people, staying on top of it, super interesting. There's a handful of newsletters, AI Tool Report. What's the other one that I catch up on? I think the guy's name is Mark Colgan for sales intelligence automation. I find his newsletter is pretty good. There's a handful of newsletters, but ultimately, I think the thing for the business owner seat to keep in mind is like making space just in general for having these kinds of mental dialogues. It can be very difficult to, at least for me, knowing so much of what I do about what's possible. It is analysis paralysis for me to be like, what could I do with my invoices to make them get sent on time? What a fun problem. And I think that is a fun one to think about, but it's also important to zoom out and have that question of, do we want to start putting resources behind the agent that's going to do the audit? Because maybe there are people who want to do that. Like, we don't need a chatbot on our website. We're a service-based business, or maybe it is good to have a light flow, but whatever. The point is that I don't need something crazy there. But if someone does want answers in 15 minutes instead of 15 days for what their system design is going to look like, maybe we can build that and put some resources behind it. So that only comes from me following my curiosity and looking at some of the tools that are on the market and knowing that A, it's possible, B, how do I want to apply it? And so to make it tactical, like the week of Thanksgiving in the US, I'm taking that week to be Think Week. So the first 3 days of the week, the whole team, we're pausing client work. And obviously we have to set ourselves up to do that well, but we want to pause client work from Monday to Wednesday. Thursday, Friday will be off because it's a US holiday. So our clients won't be expecting anything, but just taking those 3 days to be like, hey, a lot has changed in the world. Everyone on the team is curious. What could we be building? And how are we going to get those things built by the end of the year so we can go into 2025 kind of ripping? That is something that I'm really excited for. And I put a form out to the team and pinned it in Slack. And I said, hey, if anyone has any ideas, throw it in here and we'll have the conversation. We'll have daily calls and we'll see what is interesting, what can be built. And it's purely a time for you to look at the way that we do things, look at ClickUp, look at the way that the business works from fulfillment, from growth, et cetera. Ask me questions. I have the 360-degree view. So if you want a perspective on sales or you want a perspective on marketing and there's something you've always wanted to build, let's talk about it. And then just go for it and see what happens. Because I think that ultimately, when you have a global team of curious people and they all are reading different things, that's how you can take advantage of that. And the holiday where most of our clients are off. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
That's exciting. So you're like an innovation lab then. So it's essentially when I work with you, I get the cutting edge, not the same old. That's going to be part of the positioning. That has to be part of the positioning.
Yeah. And I think that it's really challenging for me personally, and something we had talked about earlier. It's like our processes are changing because we've been around for less than a year full time. So I haven't been able to apply a lot of these things. But now, after 6-7 months of me really testing offers and ideas and CRM and XYZ, it's finally time to start applying some of this stuff that I've been reading about and trying and building little prototypes. It's time to start making it scalable and where the train tracks are going to be set and run for the next 6 months. And that if we are the golden shining example of what can be done in ClickUp and what can be done in HubSpot, then we can confidently say you're getting the most up-to-date version of these two tools for your organization.
Premium. Yeah, that's a cool newsletter if you do build that. And if you do have the call onboarding option, I need that.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Grant, for everyone listening, where's the best place for people to, one, thank you for being on and learn more about what you're up to?
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. LinkedIn's probably the best place. Grant Hushek, I'm one of one. Can't find no other matches. So you can follow me there. And then my website, GrantBot Co.
I love it. We'll put those links in the show notes. Grant, thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there, you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.